Hello, you're welcome to PPL 518 Alternative Dispute Resolution 2. Remember what I said that in this course we are really looking at arbitration because of how significant and how important it has become over the years. So, we're going to be looking at another topic on arbitration that will enrich your knowledge and make you better as you make progress in this course. Remember what we always also say, that to get the best out of the course, we must take our notes, we must take part in the activities. We shouldn't be ashamed to ask questions if we have any. So let's not waste time. Let's go and see what interesting thing we are learning today. Of law on unwritten arbitration agreements. You should state the categories of arbitration agreements and differentiate between arbitration clause and submission clause. You should also be able to discuss the approach of courts to enforcement of arbitration agreements and explain the relevance of the doctrine of separability. What is an arbitration agreement? Remember, we defined it in lesson 1. We defined arbitration in lesson 1, and we pointed out that Onoselego, the case of Onoselego, was actually defining an arbitration agreement. So if you look at section 1 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, it says that an arbitration agreement is an express clause in a contract whereby parties agree to refer future disputes to arbitration, or a document where parties agree to submit their existing disputes to arbitration. You note that this definition differentiates between two types of disputes, so we'll look at that later. An arbitration agreement can be oral or written. Um, that's why you say it is written or record of contents of agreement in any other form. So it can be inferred from correspondence, can be inferred from pleadings, can be in electronic form. This is accepted under the Uncitral Model Law as well as the New York types of agreements. Now we talk about present and future. So an arbitration clause speaks of future disputes, an agreement to submit future disputes to arbitration. That's the most common form of an arbitration agreement. It is usually very short, and then it does not go into much detail because parties don't know what the nature of the dispute, if ever they will arise, what it will be like. The second type of arbitration agreement is the submission clause. It is an agreement to submit existing disputes to arbitration. So parties, there's already a dispute, parties know what they are dealing with, so it's more detailed, it's usually longer, and it is tailored to fit the circumstances of the particular. Let's just take a quick activity. So I'd like you to tell us how, or think about how an arbitration clause is different from a submission clause. So think about that and then we'll make progress. Enforcement. Nigerian courts accept arbitration as a valid means of settling disputes, of course, alternative disputes resolution. And for that reason, they will, enforce an arbitration agreement. However, courts will not enforce the result of any arbitration if there is no proof that there is an arbitration agreement. Remember, we said the agreement can be a written agreement or representation of content in any other form. So the fact that we say courts will not enforce without an agreement does not mean that it must be in writing. It is fundamental. If there's an arbitration agreement, it goes to the root of proceedings. So a court will not be deemed to have jurisdiction to hear a matter where there's an existing arbitration agreement that has been brought to the notice of the court. So it is now for a party who knows of the existence of the agreement to bring it to the court's notice, and it has to be done on time. So usually under, if you look at section 4 and 5 of the ACA, they say before parties even enter any pleadings, if parties go ahead and submit to the jurisdiction of the court, and then afterwards now want to raise the existence of an arbitration agreement, they will be deemed to have slept on their rights. On that point, you can see Apanji and um, arbitration agreement. For an arbitration agreement to be valid, it must the parties must have capacity, right? And now take your mind back to your contract law. Capacity means they must be capable of entering into that agreement. So let's look at particular categories. Of course, infants, lack capacity in many cases, except where the contract is for necessaries. Now, where arbitration is concerned, if the agreement they entered into that contains an arbitration clause is such that would benefit them, then the courts will hold that they have capacity. So in Slade and Metrodent, an apprenticeship agreement which would have been beneficial to an infant was held to be valid. And then, of course, for lunatics, it is also limited. So their capacity, but not in all cases. Some countries have immunity from arbitration, so it really depends on the country you're talking about. For Nigeria, there is no such a restriction. Nigeria does not operate that rule of immunity. So the Nigerian government, Nigerian agencies are deemed to possess capacity to enter into arbitration agreements. And you can see the case of IP Trade and Nigeria, and then you can also see Trendex Trading Corporation and the CBN. P&ID case is also very relevant on because an illegal contract is deemed to be void ab initio. It does not even exist. So if it doesn't exist, the clause, arbitration clause in it will also be deemed not to exist. On that point, you can see Taylor and Son against is separate, then it is important to look at whether the effect of the competence doctrine on an arbitrator, on the matters he can decide on or he cannot decide on. Okay, so I think we'll just take another activity and then we can. Second activity, I'd like you to discuss the extent of an infant's capacity to enter into an arbitration agreement. Discuss it or think about it, and if you can remember any case, that would be nice. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, and then we can make progress. As usual, if you have any questions, please post it on the discussion forum, and then we will try and answer and make it clearer to you. But also remember that this video is downloadable, and then please take part in the live classes so that we usually have more time to discuss, and so it may also become clearer. But whatever, if after all of that you still have a question, please feel free, post it on the discussion forum, and then we will look at it. Class, take care.